Hi, I'm John Stevenson. We're going to be on the road to Jerusalem as we start that last section of our study of the life of Christ. I ought to speak a bit about the nature of historical narrative. When we're dealing with historical narrative, and in the case of the four Gospels, we have four different narratives, each telling similar stories about Jesus. One thing that we ought to notice is that two authors do not independently express themselves alike. That is, when I have two, three, or four different accounts, and they are all describing the same event using the same words, then perhaps somebody is borrowing from somebody else. Maybe somebody was taking notes and others copied off of that. Nowadays we have to do citations and quotation marks and things like that. They didn't have those sorts of rules back then. And that's okay, but we understand sometimes, whether it was Matthew copying off of Mark, or Mark copying off of Matthew, or both of them copying off of somebody else. Sometimes those things happened. We've seen it often enough in the Old Testament where it's familiar to us. For example, there's a passage over in Isaiah chapter 2 and Micah chapter 4 where either Micah's copying off of Isaiah or Isaiah's copying off of Micah, and that's okay. We understand that. So that's one of the aspects of historical narrative. Secondly, the narratives are not exhaustive. That is, they don't tell the whole story. They just tell the part of the story that is significant to the picture that they are presenting of Jesus. And finally, we ought to note that the narratives are often in topical rather than chronological order. So that if I'm reading in Matthew, and then I turn over to Mark or Luke or John, and I see a part of the story, but then parts of it don't just seem to line up. The answer might be that they are telling the same story, but they are putting it in one of them is, or both of them maybe even, are putting the events in a topical order rather than a chronological order. And again, that's okay. We do that all the time when we relate narratives. Now, having said that, we come to Mark chapter 10, verse 32. They were on the road going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking on ahead of them. And they were amazed. They were amazed because Jerusalem was a place for them. It was a place of danger where Jesus might be put to death. There were those that were plotting his death. And you'd think maybe Jesus would be hanging back a bit and taking his time, but instead he's on a mission. He's going ahead of them. They're amazed, and those who followed were fearful. And again, he took the 12 aside and began to tell them what was going to happen to him. He knows full well. And he says, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles. They will mock him and spit on him and scourge him and kill him, and in 3 days later he will rise again." So Jesus sets forth, and this isn't the first time he has done this. He's already told them this before. They've heard this on several occasions, and now, and notice each one is getting more and more specific as Jesus sets forth what is going to be happening when they get to Jerusalem. Now, it's in that context that the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus with her sons, bowing down and making a request of him. Here was the request. He said to her, "What do you want? What do you wish?" She said to him, "Command that in your kingdom these two sons of mine," that is James and John, these were the sons of Zebedee, "these two sons of mine may sit on your right and one on your left." But Jesus answered, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink?" Now, the cup that he's about to drink is going to be the cup of his death, the cup of the wrath of God upon the cross. They didn't really get that. Nevertheless, they said to him, "We are able," as if they had no idea what that implied. He said to them, "My cup you shall drink." Indeed, they are going to be persecuted, and in the case of James, he's going to be put to death for the name of Jesus. But then Jesus goes on, "My cup you shall drink, but to sit on my right and on my left, this is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared by my Father." Jesus says, I can't give you the request, not the way you want it, but you will drink of my cup. And there's a sense in which they're going to suffer persecution, but in a bigger sense, where they will drink the cup not in the same way he drinks. He's going to drink the full cup of the wrath of God. And they will drink a cup through faith, believing in him, so that they will participate in the benefits of his death. And hearing this, the 10 became indignant with the two brothers. Now 10 plus 2 is 12. You got 12 disciples. And the other 10 disciples, whose mother hadn't come on their behalf, who had not made a request to sit at his right and left hand, they become upset. They become indignant with James and John. Why? Because they hadn't thought of it themselves. Maybe because their mother wasn't around to try to play this same game. But Jesus called them to himself and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great men exercise authority over them." That's just the way the world works. People who are in charge try to rule over people who are not in charge. It is not this way among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be your slave. And here's the pattern, verse 28. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. Jesus came to serve, and he calls those who follow him to become servants of others. Well, then they came to Jericho. They've been moving from Galilee down to Samaria, down to Jericho, and from Jericho they're going to go up to Jerusalem, but we're not going to get there quite yet. Then they came to Jericho, and as he was leaving Jericho with his disciples and a large crowd, a blind beggar, we only know him by his last name, named Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus means Bar is the Hebrew for son, and Timaeus was apparently maybe his family name, his father's name, son of Timaeus. Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, was sitting by the road. When he heard that it was Jesus the Nazarene, he began to cry out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." It's one thing to mention his name, Jesus, but he gives him the title Son of David. That's a messianic title. This blind man could see better than many people as far as his spiritual sight. Many were sternly telling him to be quiet, but he kept crying out all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." He can't see Jesus, but he can call out to him, and hopefully Jesus will hear, and that's exactly what's going to take place. Jesus stopped and said, "Call him here." So they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take courage, stand up, he's calling for you." Throwing aside his cloak, which again is an act of faith, because when a blind person throws something aside, there's no guarantee you're going to get it back again. But he throws aside his cloak and he jumped up. Again, you don't do a lot of jumping when you're blind. But he jumped up and he came to Jesus. And answering him, Jesus said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And the blind man said to him, "Rabboni," that is, my rabbi, "I want to regain my sight." And Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." This man was exhibiting faith. And immediately he regained his sight and began following him on the road. Well, he entered Jericho and now I'm switching over to Luke's account. He entered Jericho and was passing through, and there was a man called by the name of Zacchaeus. Here's the little Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. Now, all of those qualities, he was a tax collector, and a tax collector in Roman-occupied Israel was not a good thing. He had actually sold out to purchase the right to collect taxes from his fellow Jews, to deliver them over to Rome, and he would make his profit by overcharging people on their taxes. And because of that, here he was rich. Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was and was unable to because of the crowd, for he was small in stature. Wasn't a very tall man. Tried to be big politically with the Romans, tried to be big financially with his tax collecting, but he was just a little man. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree in order to see him, for he was about to pass through that way. Now, what Zacchaeus does is considered, frankly, is considered a little shameful. In an honor and shame culture, this was not a very honorable way to act. But Zacchaeus didn't care about that. He wanted to see Jesus. Verse 5, when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for today I must stay at your house. And that's sort of striking because, well, Jewish people wouldn't normally stay at the house of a tax collector, at the house of a Jewish turncoat, at the house of a trader to Israel. And he hurried and came down and received him gladly. And when they saw it, now they speaks to the people, and perhaps especially to the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders. When they saw it, they all began to grumble, saying, he has gone to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. Now that's not saying we're not all sinners, but this man was a real sinner. He was a sinner whose sins were not socially acceptable. Zacchaeus stopped and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, half of my possessions I will give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, and we're assuming maybe he had, I will give back 4 times as much. What Zacchaeus was going to do, he was going to impoverish himself for the kingdom. He was going to give half of it to the poor and use the rest of it to pay back all those people he cheated on their income tax. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house. Now that doesn't mean you buy your salvation, but it means that your faith has an impact on your life, and that includes having an impact even on your bank account. Today salvation has come to this house because he too is the son of Abraham. Remember, this man had been acting not like a son of Abraham, he'd been acting like a Roman. But now faith has come. Verse 10, for the Son of Man has come to seek and to save that which was lost. And that's what Jesus is doing in the house of Zacchaeus. He's seeking those who were lost. Now, while they were listening to these things, Jesus went on to tell a parable. Because he was near Jerusalem, and they supposed that the kingdom of God was going to appear immediately. In this expectation that Jesus is going to come back any moment, Jesus tells a parable that will teach them something quite different. So he said, a nobleman went to a distant country to receive a kingdom for himself, and then return. And he called 10 of his slaves, and gave them 10 minas, and said to them, do business with this until I come back. But his citizens hated him, and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us. So here's the nobleman. He has slaves that he's calling to be faithful, and he has citizens that are trying to undermine him and trying to do away with him. When he returned, after receiving the kingdom, he ordered that these slaves to whom he had given the money be called to him, so that he might know what business they had done. He had given charge, he'd given certain financial responsibility to these slaves. The first appeared, saying, Master, your mina has made 10 minas more. There had been a large growth from 1 to 10, and 1,000% growth. And he said to him, well done, good slave, because you have been faithful in a very little thing, you are to be in authority over 10 cities. So it escalates. The second came, saying, your mina, master, has made 5 minas. There has been a 500% escalation in profit. And he said to him also, and you are to be over 5 cities. Another came, saying, Master, here is your mina, which I kept put away in a handkerchief. For I was afraid of you, because you are an exacting man. You take up what you did not lay down, and reap what you did not sow. He said to him, by your own words I will judge you, you worthless slave. Now you say, wait a minute, he didn't lose it, he at least kept it. But he says, did you not know that I am an exacting man, taking up what I did not lay down and reaping what I did not sow? Then why did you not put my money in the bank, and having come, I would have collected it with interest? You didn't actually do anything with it. I gave you something, and you just sat on it. Then he said to the bystanders, take the mina away from him, and give it to the one who has the 10 minas. And they said to him, Master, he has 10 times already. And here's the reply, I tell you that to everyone who has, more shall be given. But from the one who does not have, even what he does have shall be taken away. And then he turns, notice he's been dealing with the slaves, those who were supposed to be working on his behalf, but now he turns from the slaves, those who are reputedly on his side, over to the enemies. But these enemies of mine, who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slay them in my presence. So there's judgment against the enemies of the kingdom, but there's even judgment toward the workers of the kingdom, to those who have aligned themselves to the kingdom. Are you doing kingdom work? Are you taking that which you've received and putting it to work? It's one thing to say, I believe. Is there anything in your life to back it up? And then those who were his enemies, who did not want his reign, well, they have an ending as well. After he had said these things, he was going on ahead, going up to Jerusalem. So here he is, still on the road to Jerusalem, where he will suffer, where he will die, where he will be raised from the dead to begin the kingdom.